Today we are talking about a subject which quite simply does not get discussed enough, even though it will affect most people at some point in their life. We're talking about climbing and training postpartum. This doesn't just affect those having a baby, it affects their partners, their co-parents and the wider support network. In an effort to throw more postpartum resources into the ring for climbers and also showcase the vastly different experiences from climber to climber, I sat down to interview a number of world-class climbers including Caro, Mina and Beth. I also interviewed a pelvic health specialist, Emily Elgar, and a coach for pregnant and postpartum climbers, Joy Black. My first question was, when did you start climbing again after giving birth? And what did you do, or what was it like for you?
I started climbing again, I think it was 1 month and a half-ish. But I waited until my physio cleared me, basically with my, because of the pelvis. It felt horrible. Literally the worst climber I've ever been in my life. Everybody says it's not an injury. I think it's way harder than most climbing injuries to come back because you have zero body tension, you're completely exhausted, and you're trying to find 5 minutes to start climbing again.
So with my first child, I had an emergency C-section and quite a long, difficult labour. So I started climbing a bit later, around 8 weeks after seeing physio and kind of getting signed off and checked over and everything. And with my second child, I had a much more straightforward birth, a natural birth, and so I started around 6 weeks, again after seeing a physio and getting kind of a green light on that front. And I just started slowly. I started earlier than those timeframes with lots of kind of physio-based exercises, and then I gradually just built in easy climbing.
I didn't start climbing again until 4 or 5 months postpartum. I had a pretty hard physical postpartum, and so when I started climbing again, the thing that sounded and felt right to my body was going out and climbing very easy, long routes where I could just kind of let my body remember how to move and climb again.
So going back to climbing, I guess there's a few things really to consider before I'd talk someone through going back to climbing. I mean, let's go right back to the beginning. So in that first stage after a baby is delivered, it's really important we consider those healing times, and depending on what sort of delivery you've had may influence how ready you are to climb at a certain point. Now, the general guidance we look at is those first 6 weeks. So that reason is because of soft tissue healing time. And whilst there's other things which I'll explain in a moment that we would consider, I really need to help protect you in that time so that those, whether it's cuts, tears, or maybe you've had a C-section, so those wounds can recover well. And I think hopefully some of this will help you understand why that's important. So first of all, let's say if you've had a C-section, by 6 weeks, the tensile strength, so the strength that scar can cope in terms of tension compared to your tissue prior, is around just over 50%. So whilst you might be feeling great and feeling ready to start moving, it's always good just to keep that in the back of the mind when you're going back to climbing. However, if you've had a vaginal delivery and you've not had any cuts or tears or any intervention, you might feel ready to go back sooner than 6 weeks. Now, we're never quite sure exactly if there's been any other little tears kind of higher up in the vaginal wall or anywhere else that hasn't been stitched or you haven't been told about. But again, it's just thinking that there may be a degree of recovery still going on. But around 6 weeks is the stage where we'd see you be back ready to start doing some exercise. But that doesn't mean you sit around and do absolutely nothing for 6 weeks. You'd be definitely looking at all sorts of things from breathwork to pelvic floor, getting moving and exploring your new body because your body's changed so much. And then from there, it's really guiding people about the appropriateness and the readiness. So we're looking for warning signs. So if I talk you through warning signs, that will give you a sign of whether or not it's appropriate to go back. So are you feeling any heaviness and dragging down below? Have you got any joint problems that are going on? So maybe some lingering back pain from pregnancy. Have you got a diastasis that you're not able to support and activate and control? And there's other things where you might be experiencing some leakage or some urgency in your bladder. Now, these aren't absolute no's, but they are definite signs for you just to be aware of how you're going back to climbing and really working with your trainer or your physio to look at what's the appropriate stage for you to be pitching at as well. The last thing to consider really is what have you been doing in the rest of your pregnancy? Were you climbing all the way through your pregnancy, or did you have to stop because you had really severe, morning sickness or severe pelvic girdle pain? that window of sort of deconditioning is going to need to be addressed as well. So it's one of those kind of politician answers of how long is a piece of string. So we kind of use that as a framework and then look at what you did for your pregnancy, where you are now, and are there any warning signs or anything that would guide us of where we maybe need to tailor or adapt how you're going back to your climbing.
After my daughter, who is 4 years old, I returned to climbing a little bit later because my focus at that time was less on climbing and more on trail running. I returned to trail running at about 4 weeks postpartum and actually did a half marathon, a trail run at 4 months postpartum. So I went climbing a few times during that, time when I was also training for the half marathon, but I was a little more focused on running at that time. So after I did the half marathon, I changed my focus back towards climbing a little more seriously, but I was about 4.5 months postpartum at that time. With my youngest son, I went back to the wall at 4 weeks postpartum. Now, even though I was back on the wall at 4 weeks postpartum, this doesn't mean that I went back with a really high intensity at 4 weeks postpartum. And it also doesn't mean that I was doing nothing before I got back on the wall. So I was doing work at home where I was reconnecting with my deep core, making sure that I had great thoracic mobility, rib mobility, hip mobility, and also allowing time for my pelvic floor to heal. I had an uncomplicated vaginal delivery, but even with an uncomplicated vaginal delivery, your pelvic floor still goes through trauma during delivery. So it is really important to just be respectful, especially during the acute healing stage. And even though I probably was capable of doing some climbing before that time, from a healing and recovery standpoint, I knew that it was important to wait just a little bit longer until I felt really, really good about the spot that my body was at from a connection with my breath, my deep core, and my pelvic floor before I went and did some easier climbing on the wall.
It's so important to remember that everyone's experience is different. This part of the video is not supposed to set any kind of expectation, but rather show that everyone's experience is different from person to person. Outside of elite level climbing and elite level athletes, there's going to be many different pathways getting back to climbing and training after birth. However, if one theme runs here, it would be the importance of regaining pelvic health and core health, but at the same time also not feeling a rush to get back to your climbing or training. My next question was, what is one of the most important things or exercises every postpartum climber should consider doing?
I feel like postpartum you can find a lot of non-specific exercises for basically not peeing yourself. So maybe I'll hold on to what was my mini trick. I had 1 kilo weights kind of all around the house, and whenever baby was happy, either if I was really lucky on the floor or on a cushion or sleeping not on me, I would take my 1 kilo weights and do, let's say, 10 reps of that or 10 reps of any sort of exercises, paying attention to my body position. And also did that with the baby in the baby carrier. Yeah, so there is no way that you will have an hour straight to train back. So you need to micro train.
I would say, however much you want to get back to climbing, is start with the foundations as your kind of general principle. So think about starting with breath work, with pelvic floor work, with deep abdominal work, and getting those kind of real basic foundations in place before you move on to more complex or more loaded exercises.
I feel like the thing that I would recommend for postpartum climbers to do is see a pelvic floor therapist. I feel like they're life changers, and it can really help you understand how fast or slow you can go after having your child.
It's very hard to pick just one thing you should be doing. In fact, I'm going to cheat and I'm going to pick two. So the first thing would be definitely about coming back to the essentials. So how are you? I love working with climbers, particularly because you're so aware around your stacking of your rib cage and your pelvis and using your breath. And often that has really drifted and changed for your pregnancy. And it's just about re-exploring that. So really working on that coordination of breath and pelvic floor, and also being then able to utilize your whole entire system. So by that, I mean, you're not just getting pulled into positions when you load, and so if you're kind of having to like lift or reach or against resistance, that you've got choice of how you load, that you can bring that rib cage and pelvis over each other. You can utilize the pelvic floor and the diaphragm together because they work together as a team. And if they're maybe sort of a little bit mismatched or a little bit drifting off, it can be really hard for you to get the efficiency of power. And also that's one of the things that we're going to be looking at if you've got some of those watch signs when you're going back to sports. So if you're leaking, or if you've got pelvic floor pain, or if you've got diastasis, we're going to be looking at optimizing that. But I guess to kind of sneak in my second one is that if you have a pre-existing sort of Achilles heel, so to speak, a dodgy hip, a previous shoulder injury, or anything like that, which you always know that kind of rumbles up and down, I would absolutely be going back to that, going back to the basics of it, making sure that that hasn't sort of drifted. Because what often happens is people come in, and it's a great opportunity in postnatal rehab because we can like double down on some of those things that you kind of got by on in terms of rehab in other areas. So yeah, you can't escape your body's history. That is still there, so you have to invest in those. But from a kind of pregnancy perspective, I'd definitely be looking about restoring that ability to load and stack and support the entire core together.
We all have different experiences during pregnancy, labor, and delivery. So it is super tough to say just one. It is always going to be it depends. But I do think that we can look at it in terms of one concept or one thing that we need to keep in mind in our training that can broadly apply to anyone who has gone through pregnancy, labor, and delivery. And whether that is a C-section or a vaginal delivery, this will still apply broadly to everyone. And that is regaining the strength in your core musculature. It's really important that we understand a couple of different things. Number one, during pregnancy, there are a lot of changes that happen to your core musculature. And this is even beyond the changes that you can visibly see. So you visibly see that, hey, by the end of pregnancy, there's a really big baby bump. Like we can visibly see, we know that has happened, but we also have changes that we can't see. So the changes that we can't see are the muscle thickness. So the rectus abdominis, external obliques, internal obliques, and the transverse abdominis muscles, those are our four major core muscles, if you will. They actually decrease in muscle thickness and they decrease in contractile strength. So these are things that we can't necessarily see, but they happen. So we really have to make sure postpartum that we are consistently and progressively overloading our core for an extended period of time. So this doesn't mean that your core can't heal on its own. It will do a bit of healing on its own postpartum. The healing that I'm speaking of is your rectus abdominis muscles coming back together, so regaining some tension through the linea alba and increasing the muscle thickness of the rectus abdominis, the contractile strength of those musculatures. They will progress a bit on their own, but there is going to reach a point where that's it. So without intentional effort, you will still be at a strength deficit with your core. We also have research that shows us that the contractile strength of the transverse abdominis, so that's that deep core musculature, is reduced for up to 4 months postpartum. So that's well beyond that 6-week mark that most people think, oh, well, like 6 weeks, now I'm just good and I can just go do whatever. So we need to use this concept of, hey, your core went through a lot, some that you saw and some that you didn't see. And it is really, really important to keep in mind that it's going to take a while for all of these things to just kind of like regain strength, but we need to put effort and training behind it so that we're not doing, rehab type exercises for forever. So it really is, I would say that's like the most important thing to keep in mind, is that you're going to start with exercises that very much look like rehab, but then at some point, the rehab stops and you have to keep challenging your core, because ideally you want it to come out stronger than what it was before pregnancy. And I've seen it happen so many times. It is 100% possible, but you have to put work into it.
I framed this question specific to rock climbers, but you'll have seen that the answers were anything but specific to rock climbing. Regaining core strength and control is paramount, regardless of if you're a climber or not. As a climber, you're probably going to need to progress this training further than if you were not trying to transition back into rock climbing, but you're still going to start with the foundations and fundamentals. This could be things like breath work, but I'll add some links so there's some more resources you can explore in the description below. My next question was, what's the biggest myth about postpartum climbing or training?
Actually, the main issue is that there isn't a myth. It's like it's not a thing. This is the real issue, is that 99% of the time you're not supposed to get back to being a good climber. That's what people tell you. I think this is the myth. The only way to correct that is to do it, so you can become a role model. So if you show everybody that it's possible, some other people are going to do it behind, and then we can change. There's so much work, but we really need to change society there.
I don't think there were myths, so to speak, that I came across, but more just a lack of information, not really knowing what it was going to look like for me. And obviously you can have so many different types of pregnancy, so many different experiences of birth and postpartum, that it feels like a real lottery. So you can't kind of plan for it so much or know what to expect.
I feel like the biggest myth for me when I started climbing again was that everybody can bounce back, and that because we're elite athletes or because we're athletes that we should be able to get to point A or point B in a certain amount of time. But everyone's not the same, and every body and every pregnancy and every birth is so different. That for me was the biggest myth that I had to really learn.
So I think the biggest surprise and myth for people when they come into clinic to work on their rehab is that rehab is linear, that you get given, maybe you've done some research and you've read that after 6 weeks you can do this, and after 12 weeks you can go back to dynamic work, and you've got this little timeline in your head. And whilst on paper and in research, that is what we would advise, the true reality of rehab is just so different. It is a bit of a mess, to be honest. And that's okay. You are gonna get to that point where you think, okay, things are starting to turn. So if your symptoms are up here or your rehab is up here and you start to turn the tide on it, something will kick off. Somebody will get a stomach bug, somebody will get a virus, you'll go back to work and it will go off again, and then you'll improve and it'll go off again, and it's just all over the place. So I would give yourself lots and lots of grace in your rehab. If you are struggling to get kind of recovered and getting back into your sport, I would double down on what are the most important elements to get you back there. So you really understand, well, if I am short on time, or if I'm not as well, or I've been sleep deprived, or if there's a, whatever horrendous sort of, kicking off in terms of growth spurts that are happening, that that you can spend a really valuable short amount of time focusing your rehab rather than trying to do everything.
I think the biggest myth is that you need to wait 6 weeks to start training again. So I will have people come to me all the time. And so, 6 weeks is generally what we say for an uncomplicated vaginal delivery, around 8 weeks for a C-section. I have people come to me all the time and say, well, I just had my baby, but I want to work with you, but I'm going to wait 6 weeks, or I want to work with you, but I need to wait 8 weeks. And that is just not true. So here's the thing, is that you think that you're going to wait 6 weeks, and then at that 6 week mark, you're going to just start this full on training program and it's going to go great. Or you're going to wait 8 weeks and then you'll just be able to jump right back into it. And that's just not the case. So I am not saying that immediately after delivery, you jump into a training program. I am not saying that whatsoever. But what I am saying is that during that acute healing phase, and so that's generally around up to that 4 to 6 week postpartum vaginal delivery and up to 8 week for a C-section, we need to be laying a foundation so that you can get into a little more robust training program at that 6 week or 8 week time.
We didn't really find a prevailing myth with this question. Instead, what it showed is that the whole topic of postpartum climbing and training really just isn't spoken about enough, or there's not an abundance of resources out there for these people. This is probably true with sports in general and not just rock climbing. So rather than common misconceptions being shared around, it's more common for people just to not know what to expect at all. Hopefully this video goes some way to build up that knowledge and understanding of the postpartum climbing period. However, if you have any of your own experiences or knowledge you want to share, please use the comments below as a forum for other people to read into. My next question was, what's the single best piece of advice you could give to someone having their first child? And I said this could be either for during their pregnancy or in that postpartum period.
I would say I have a lot of advices for somebody who's coming back or trying to come back. Maybe the first advice is do not expect it to be easy. Especially when you're underslept, it feels like no way. So I think, really do not underestimate the difficulty of it, and we all do because nobody talks about it. So how hard can it be? Be kind to yourself. Yeah, I think Maddie really taught me that. Of course, as a young parent, you're gonna have your program and you're gonna miss at least half of your program. And sometimes it feels like it's easier to just give it up entirely and and kind of like close the program, never listen to it. Just do whatever you can and be kind to yourself. Everything that you manage to do is a plus, and everything that you don't manage to do, just ignore it.
My best piece of advice would be that your body is pretty amazing and it will do a lot of the healing on its own. And yes, it's good to do your pelvic floor exercises, your breathing work, all the kind of foundational stuff to get your strength back for climbing. But time is also just a really important part of the process. And I think I didn't really appreciate that first time round, and I'm trying to remember it second time round, that it does just take time for your body to recover, but it will get there.
I think the best piece of advice that I would give, or that I got, was not to rush. And that's so hard because, at least for me, I loved being in my body how I used to be in climbing, and I knew how I could use it as a tool. And to let go of that and just really feel this transformation and be open to the next thing, the future that was different than where I was before, was a huge thing for me to learn. But I think it's the best piece of advice I could give, that it's not going to be the same, but change doesn't mean that it's worse. It can be a lot better.
First baby is incredible and special and terrifying and all of the above. I think you don't know what's going to happen is my biggest advice. Like, you don't know, and that's okay. Nobody knows. Even as health professionals, we don't know what's going to happen for you. You might have the smoothest pregnancy and then something really surprises you in your delivery, or vice versa. You might have a horrendous, pelvic pain, and then you have this dreamy delivery and you recover really, really easily and quickly, and you just can't predict sometimes. So I would go into it with lots of grace and patience for your body. I always encourage my ladies, especially around their delivery, to stay calm and stay positive. Like every single bit, every single step is going to be that step forwards in not only meeting your baby, but also having a happy, healthy pregnancy, and also enjoying that postnatal rehab as well. It's such an incredible, very unique version of rehab, which although it's a little bit kind of all over the place, it is an incredible way to really engage with your body and explore what your body is doing and how to work with it. So yeah, expect the unexpected.
The best piece of advice, just not even from a coach standpoint, but just from another woman and mom standpoint, is just remember that it's a marathon, not a sprint. And the days are going to feel really long, but the weeks will pass by fast, the months will pass by fast, and it will be so just crazy because at some point your baby is turning 1 and you look back and you're like, oh my God, it all went by so fast. So just remember, there's no sprint to this. It's a marathon. And the best thing that you can do is consistently show up for yourself bit by bit, because there are going to be days that feel so unbelievably hard, and you'll think, I can't do this. I don't, what even is the point? I can't train like I used to, or I don't feel strong anymore. And it will feel really discouraging, and it will feel hard. But know that this is normal, and it won't always be this way. I'm not saying that at some point it just magically gets easy overnight, because it doesn't. I have 3 kids. One is practically grown. He's 18. I have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. And there are days still where I'm like, I can't do this. But I always keep doing it. And you just want to remember, again, that the magic in your training, the magic in your climbing, it happens from consistency. So you just have to figure out a way to be consistent, and that's how you're going to reach your goals. It's with consistency, and also showing yourself lots and lots and lots of grace, because it's going to take a lot of grace to get through those really hard days.
I think the theme here is to be compassionate with yourself and have patience. Your body has gone through the biggest physical change it will likely ever experience, and that will be hard to come back from, even if you didn't have a child to look after. So it's a mindset thing as much as a physical thing, which is why you're likely going to need support along the way, which brings me to my next question. Many fathers or partners to postpartum women can feel a bit helpless at times. So what role did you feel you most needed, or what can we do to help?
This is the big trick, actually. This is the main trick of getting back to climbing. You need a hands-on co-parent. There is no, I don't think there's an alternative. And in my case, I would say there's been a lot of re-education. It doesn't come easy, because this is not how we've been raising our, well, the dads of tomorrow, the dads of today. I think as a dad, you have to totally reinvent the role of fatherhood, the role of a father, because usually you haven't seen your dad do what you should be doing. You have to deconstruct it and rebuild it, and that's really tricky, and it will create some tension, but I don't think there's an alternative. I think this is a key moment in a couple's life where there is no way you're going to avoid arguments unless the woman kind of sits on her hopes. And I don't think this is the solution. I'm really pushy, but on paper it looks really easy. It looks like as a dad, you need to give 50% of the time. In real, you should give much more than that, because you didn't go through putting on 15 kilos, losing all of your abdominals, breastfeeding, birth. So the harder part of the job is for sure for the woman, so you need to kind of create extra space, except becoming a parent kind of radically diminishes your space, so you try to hold on to whatever. It feels like there's nothing left for you anyway, and you're supposed to give away these few hours of a day, and it's tricky.
I think the biggest thing that partners can do is to really, I mean, it totally depends on your situation, but to really support the woman as the woman supports the baby. Certainly in my situation, I was breastfeeding, especially with both children, but my first didn't take a bottle at all. So it was very much, I was looking after the baby, and my husband was really looking after me and doing lots of the other stuff that, so to take things off my plate, essentially. And also just being really kind when I'm tired and maybe not my best self. He was really forgiving and kind to me in those tougher moments.
For me, when my husband would not only just take care of our baby, but really did things to allow me to have time and me to heal in a way that I was just trying to shove under the rug, because I was so, caught up in feeding the baby and keeping the baby alive and all that sort of thing. So anytime that he really reminded me, like, I need to take care of myself and we need to also focus on me, that was really huge, honestly.
Partners are so important in this, and I know that sometimes they feel a little bit sidelined and a bit hopeless and a bit clueless on what on earth am I meant to be doing. The biggest gift you can give your partner is time. give them time to be able to do their exercises, to get some headspace, to be able to do the things that are really, really important. So, be proactive. If I always talk about kind of love languages in clinic. So there's 5 love languages, and if you don't know what they are, they're physical touch, gifts, quality time, words of encouragement, and acts of service. And understanding what your partner needs, this is one of a really easy way. So if you know that actually your partner won't go and do their rehab, or they won't go and do their me time until the house is tidy, just go and tidy the house for them. If it is, giving them the encouragement that they can do it, then absolutely give them that. But I would say giving them time is so important, so they've got the space to create what they need to do. So whether that time is by doing something practical for them, or physically taking the baby/children away, because as soon as you hear that baby, as soon as you hear that conversation between your children where they start bickering, your head is out of your rehab. So give them time, give them space, protect them in that.
This is a beautiful question, by the way. And I love that this was, in your train of thought, because this is really huge and a lot of people don't recognize this. For me personally, and for the athletes that I work with, one of the biggest things that I have seen is the support that your partner needs to be able to go training or have some sort of movement. So whether that looks like her being able to just go take a walk, or to get in a training session, or, financially supporting her so that she has a coach or can go to pelvic floor physical therapy. So as a partner, what you want to understand is that you have got to be bought into this whole thing just as much, if not more, than she is, because she is going through so much. There are going to be days when she is not going to want to go do the training that she initially was so excited about and wanted to do, and was really stoked because it was going to help her get back to X, Y, or Z. And on those days when she's feeling like that, just helping her know, hey, I've got the baby, you can go do this, or even just telling her how proud you are of her for working towards her goals again.
If you're in the postpartum stage or soon to be, please send this video to your partner, co-parent, or support network. I'm not just saying that because I want this video to get more views, although that does help it reach more people. I'm saying that because the partners are going to play such an important role in the postpartum recovery. My next question was, have you seen a positive outcome in your climbing since becoming a mother?
So Zoe is nearly 3 now, so I think I'm sort of out of the woods. I've done my first E10 post-baby, so clearly there's been some positives. I think the main big things I've learned to become patient. I was never as patient before, so and that transfers into climbing, like long-term projecting. This is a new trick that I didn't have.
I'm definitely more relaxed about my climbing since becoming a mother. I think because there's just so much more going on in life, and everything is a bit busier, and I really appreciate the times that I do get to go out climbing. I'm more relaxed around goals. I guess you could say that's not necessarily a good thing, but it feels like a good thing to me. I feel like I'm in a really good kind of headspace with climbing and what I want to get from climbing, and just getting out and moving is something that I appreciate on like a higher level nowadays.
I feel like I enjoy climbing on a whole different level than I didn't before becoming a mom. I think it's probably multiple reasons for that. You have limited time, so you really appreciate what you get. I appreciate being able to share it with friends and family in a way that I was probably too pressured to do before. And I just feel like it just really reminded me on things that nourish me and what I enjoy, and now can share with others.
Probably the most positive thing for me in my climb is, I still describe myself as a baby climber. I've only been climbing for a couple of years, and I got introduced to it by all the amazing clients that I was meeting. They were just all so passionate about it that that's what drew me into climbing. And one of my most precious things for me about climbing is actually that my son has started climbing in the last year as well. So once or twice a week, if we're doing well, we get to go off and go and climb together. And seeing him discover it and explore it and sharing that together and having that sense of adventure and freedom, because as a mum in her 40s, I don't often get to do many things that are new and adventurous and give me that sense of excitement and freedom in my body. So to do that and then share that as a mum with my son, who's 14 now, and I'm just waiting for his growth spurt to come, where at the moment we're climbing the same. But no doubt very soon we will not be climbing the same. But I'm loving seeing that journey for him and also for me as well.
I would say that one thing that has definitely been a positive outcome in my climbing over the last 4 years since having my daughter is that I have learned to not hold on as tightly to climbing. Before my daughter was born, I was a mom, and my oldest son, he is now 18. So he was 14 when my daughter was born. But climbing had a very strong hold on my life. A lot of my identity was wrapped up into being a climber. And one of the shifts that happened when I had my second child was that I learned that it did not need to have that much of a stronghold, and it did not need to have that much of my identity wrapped up into it. I would say that now I actually value my time climbing way more than I did before I was a mom of 2 or before I was a mom of 3, because I have way less time to climb now than I did before. But when I do climb, I'm able to really enjoy it and not get frustrated if I'm not achieving certain goals, and just know that they will come with time. As long as I keep being consistent, they're going to come. And even if they don't, it will still be okay. It doesn't make me any less of a person. It doesn't make me any less of a coach, any less of a mom or a wife or a friend.
There you have it. Being a mum can make climbing even more enjoyable and fulfilling, which I think was incredible considering a lot of the mums I interviewed in this video were already committing a huge part of their life to the sport. I would say this is true for anyone that becomes a dad too, but this doesn't necessarily mean it happens quickly or easily to have that mindset shift. I'm aware that much of the experience shown in this video comes from climbers that live a certain lifestyle, so I want to hear your experience of this postpartum period and recovery too. If you're happy to share that, please comment below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. Videos like this are unlikely to get pushed by the YouTube algorithm, despite the fact I think it's some of the most important and meaningful content we create. So anything you can do to help this reach more new mums is greatly appreciated. Lastly, a huge thank you to all of the climbers that shared their experience in this video, and a very special thank you to Emily and Joy for sharing their practical experience in working with postpartum climbers. I'll leave a link to everyone's socials and contact details below so you can find those people, as well as some other useful resources that we think might be helpful. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.